So, and this is what my note is. So say it's your first day in the White House and you're just elected to president. So what do you think the first priority things you would do? I know you mentioned something about giving action and pardon and these type of things. What would be the first 4 or 5, not a certain number of things you would do?
Two things that a president could do right now, if she wanted, in fact, that needn't go through Congress. The president essentially has authority. So one of them is to cancel student debt. And how is that? The president, by power of appointment, has influence over the Federal Reserve. The president cannot tell the Federal Reserve what to do, but the president basically appoints the chair of the Federal Reserve. And in doing that, the president, myself, if I have the honor to serve, can choose a chair of the Fed who understands that this is the economic crisis of our times, that an entire generation has been locked into student debt with no hope of getting out of it in the current economy, and that it is in fact the stimulus package of our dreams to cancel that debt through a quantitative easing. This is one of the ways, one of the many ways in which Wall Street got bailed out, but they got $4.5 trillion worth of quantitative easing in 3 different packages. And what students need is a tiny fraction of that. It's about $1.5 trillion. So in the course of one quantitative easing, we could end student debt, and we essentially then jumpstart the economy for the 21st century, because it has always fallen to the younger generation to reinvent the economy that we need. So we're all kind of dead in the water until we liberate a generation that's basically been hung out to dry, working 2 and 3 part-time jobs, when you should be creating the economy of the future, starting the small businesses, the nonprofits, the cooperatives. You should be reinventing, what society looks like, using the skills that you've already acquired. So liberating you to do that is essentially a great leap forward for all of us. It's the best stimulus package imaginable, and it actually doesn't cost us, because it is a quantitative easing, which we could talk more about some other time if you don't know how that works, but it essentially expands the money supply. It's not paid for in tax dollars, and it's okay to do that as long as you're making the economy more productive. That's one thing we would do, and as far as I'm concerned, that's a gateway issue, because it's the younger generation that always leads the charge on social transformation, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it was the Civil Rights Movement, whether it's environmental justice or on labor justice or $15 an hour minimum wage. It's always young people who are just at that stage of life that you're the ones that are pushing the envelope. So if we're going to get out of this crisis that we're in, we need to liberate you so that you are the ground troops for us to move our agenda forward and address the other issues of justice. And then very briefly, the president also has the power to tell the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, to do a really radical thing, which would be to use science in determining what substances are listed and which aren't. Because the minute science is used, then essentially marijuana and hemp are no longer listed substances, because in fact they are less dangerous than alcohol and tobacco. And likewise to pardon the hundreds of thousands of people who are wrongly incarcerated for recreational use of substances that are safer than smoking a cigarette.
One more question. Sorry, we're over time.
Okay. Hi. One of the biggest issues that are being questioned right now is national security, and that's what's helping Trump lead in the polls. So far in the past 2 days, there has not been one mention of ISIS or Islamic threats or anything about national security. How are you going to take that issue and expand that to your platform?
Great. So we will tell the truth about national security, because right now what Trump is saying, what Clinton is saying...
Clinton's saying nothing.
Well, right, but what they've said consistently, and their policies are very much founded on, we need more militarism. We need more military might. That investing over half of our discretionary budget, over half of your income taxes, which are going into the military right now, that's not enough, right? We need a stronger, more armed, and more numerous military. Well, it's really important to look at what's the track record of this militarism, because in fact we've spent $6 trillion, according to a recent Harvard study, when you include the health care for our wounded veterans whom we put into harm's way. So when you add up those costs, it's about $6 trillion for these wars on terror since 9/11. And that $6 trillion turns out to be, guess what? $75,000 for every American household. Okay? What are you getting for your money here? What you've gotten are failed states, worse terrorist threats, and mass refugee migrations. What resources did we not mobilize? You know, did we leave any stone unturned in our response to the 9/11 terrorist bombings on the trade towers with the airplanes? We did everything imaginable and then some. Tens of thousands of U.S. soldiers that have been killed and maimed. Actually, 1 million people in Iraq alone who've been killed in the crossfire, which is not winning us the hearts and minds of the Middle East. This plan is like not working, and in fact, with each turn of the cycle of violence, we only get into more violence and more death and destruction, and the next wave of terrorism is even worse. So we call for a new offensive in the Middle East. It's called a peace offensive, and it starts with a weapons embargo. Since we are arming all sides, we're the major supplier of arms in the Middle East and around the world, actually. It's relatively easy for us to initiate this arms embargo to help cool out this crisis of war in the Middle East. And we also call for freezing the funding of those countries who continue to fund terrorist groups. And this applies to the U.S. as well, because the CIA has also provided support of a variety of fashions to what we call the good terrorists, like the al-Nusra Front, who at one time we called a good form of terrorism, a branch of al-Qaeda in the Middle East. So we call for actually freezing those funds. Hillary Clinton herself identified the Saudis through a leaked State Department memo, Saudi Arabia as still the major funder of jihadi terrorism world over. So it's not rocket science how to deal with this. The Saudis and the CIA actually began this little experiment in jihadi terror to resist the Russians and the Soviet Union, actually, at that time, in Afghanistan. We helped create an international terror movement to support the power of the Mujahideen in fighting the Russians. And this little strategy has come back to bite us in a very big way, because out of that, Mujahideen grew al-Qaeda, and then out of the war against al-Qaeda, we got ISIS. So at each turn, and the Taliban are far stronger than they were when we first started to fight them. That is true of every terrorist group that we have been fighting. Each of them is actually more powerful, has more territory, is more numerous now than they were when we started. So this policy is a catastrophic failure. We are not going to survive it. So we call for a peace offensive. We started this mess. We can call it to a halt, and we can do that as a way of initiating a peace process and moving forward from there. Maybe we'll say more about that tonight. We'll also have more time for Q&A tonight if others want to stick around who haven't had a chance to talk. But I'll just say, moving forward with a foreign policy based on international law and human rights, that's how we get to peace and security. That's how we get to actually cutting our military budget and putting our dollars into true security here at home.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.